How close do you actually think you are to being able to, or do you think that builds a lost cause for clearing?
Yeah.
Are you trying the ball lightning
felt...
thing?
Yeah. I have not felt powerful yet on a single build.
Yeah, I think that's the game.
Yeah, that is the game.
Like, I was having fun in the first day and a half, but I don't think I've been having fun in this game for quite a while. I just feel like I either want all of my abilities to synergize to make it feel like I'm accomplishing something, even if I'm not really, or be powerful. And I don't have that on anything I've tried.
Yep, every build's missing something to like link the pieces together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm
All
still
the builds
feeling
that had that got it.
It feels like
I mean, even the builds that had it didn't have it. Like there was still a gap.
Talking.
Oh my bad.
It feels like they're very scared of making the builds, like the theory crafting, like the builds build themselves, like in D3, where you just get all the stuff for your one carrying ability. So they've added a lot of these generic stuff and just a tiny sprinkle of stuff for like one particular skill, but it comes at the cost of any of the builds or the skills being pushed to the point where they feel powerful. It feels like you have a ton of utility, but you're not really good at anything.
I agree.
I think a large part of what fuels that too is that things don't like interact strongly together. Like things.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's like they don't want that to happen because in D3 there's 13 item slots, and it's very easy to figure out 9 of them on your own, and then the last is like, depending on your knowledge of the item pool, it's either really obvious or really not, and they just don't want that to happen. And so we end up with a lot of these, like, you gain a barrier when you get hit by the way,
is that a bad thing? Like, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Though,
what D3 has, the solution D3 had to, I don't think it's bad.
The problem that you end up with then is that your abilities feel bad, and so the obvious, or like the brute force solution is to just make the things that power abilities that much more powerful. But then it's like feast or famine with builds.
Yeah.
Okay, but like I think they did try to, because one thing that because not every slot can have an offensive power. So they decided that, hey, some slots are going to have utility powers because we don't want every slot to have offensive. So you don't, because like before, like in D3, right? Like you're never ever going to sacrifice, like a damage slot.
Yeah, defensive items are bad.
For defensive item, right?
That's,
so they decided,
that's so not true though.
I mean,
that's so not true. Every build, every build still used 4 of their item slots in D3 for DR.
Yeah, because there wasn't an offensive one that was good for that build in that item slot.
Like the only build, literally the only build that omitted those for damage in every slot was Rat, because Rat was an anomaly. But
well, yeah, but that one also I think had a larger item pool than most of their builds.
Yeah. Well, a smaller item pool, which made it larger because they had more multiple. Yeah.
Like Demon Hunter, for example, taking Wraps of Clarity, it's like oftentimes there just isn't an offensive item that's good in that slot.
Foot cramp.
Sometimes there is.
What the fuck, bro? Foot cramp. They attacked me while I'm being IRL cramped.
I've used the analogy before that in PoE, it feels like you have like small granular Lego blocks that you put together in order to form your build, and like things interlock with each other, and you have like these small things that you build up into a whole character. Whereas in D3, it felt a lot more like you were going and just pulling your toy off the shelf. And now both of those systems can make it to where you have a fun time with your toy, but like the building process was very different for PoE builds and D3 builds. And now in D4, it feels like they tried to go with the Lego brick approach, but they're just shit Legos.
Yeah, you bought a box and they're missing like 3, and you bought the box, but it's missing like the connector to the 2 pieces.
So
which is strange because it's Legos and you're supposed to be able to.
Yeah. As someone who doesn't play a whole lot of Path, I've tried it twice, 2 different seasons, And I did really enjoy, while having very little knowledge about the game, getting to level 70. I didn't feel like it was hard, and I felt like I was making a lot of progression.
You haven't played recently?
How
Yeah.
recently
That was a while ago.
Yeah,
okay, you haven't played recently.
Well, so, let's just...
Yeah, you can keep going, but just know that GGG has gone in and taken away the easy early.
Sure, but like, you're still missing a lot of stuff, because just getting 70 levels is like, there's still a lot more to building a character in Path, but it still feels like you're making a lot of progression. And here I am at like level 61 or something. I don't know, what am I? Yeah, 61. And it's taking an excruciatingly long time to get here. And leveling is just one of like 3 different things you need for progression.
Leveling
so it's like...
But...
What?
I think that leveling is like the only thing you need for progression because of...
I guess to me there's like your skill tree, your Paragon board, and aspects. Debatably, you could throw like base gear stats in there. That it's like 4, well, at least 3 things that you're thinking about all the time. But I just like completely lost my train of thought. It still doesn't feel good. Like, it feels like in, at least way back when I played Path, the floor to get into the game was a lot higher, even though it had a very high ceiling for what your character could do. And in this, it feels like the floor, there's like 50 feet below is the floor in this game to really get into the game to start doing stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that in Path of Exile, it's very likely that when you go to create your build, by the end of it, you'll create a shit build, and like if you were just starting from nothing. But there is the potential to make some good stuff in Path of Exile.
Dude,
arguably.
Fucking lightning.
Depending on your definition of good shit. Dude. Whereas in D4, it feels like you can't... You can make good shit. Like, there are good builds, but it just feels like it's so limited. And it doesn't feel organic in the way that... Like, from what I've seen of good builds, it's... Like, they tried to get away from the pull an item off the shelf thing that D3 had, but it, like, the only good... Like, they don't have enough of a base power level to where it makes it to where you can assemble your own stuff. Like, it still ends up being, like, the really strong builds are just equip all the shit that has the name of the ability that you're using.
Yeah. So,
and, like,
I play a lot of
trading. There's less of them now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I play a lot of trading card games, and so there's, like, an idea that comes up, which is the difference between a deck of good cards and a good deck of cards.
Yeah.
And it feels like you assemble a deck of good cards in this, like a build of good effects, but you don't assemble a good build a lot of the time.
Right, yeah. It's like every card you put inside, it's a decent card, it's a 3 out of 5. It's efficient for its mana, does some good effect.
And I would argue that we're not even putting together good cards because we just don't have good cards available to us.
I don't think that there are good cards available in the game. To be honest, these
I guess
relatively. Compared to what?
One thing that's really difficult in card games is when they spoil a new set, it's very difficult because you can't really playtest unless you proxy it, I guess. But you don't know the rest of the set, so proxying with only a little bit of the spoils is kind of useless for playtesting. So it's very, very difficult to evaluate cards before they come out. And one of the fallacies that people make is that how they just very too early decide if something's good or bad. And one of the things that people have a hard time understanding a lot of the time is you want every effect in the game. There's very rarely an effect that you don't want, except in very few circumstances. So it's not necessarily about good or bad. It's about being marginally better than everyone else.
Card games are a little different in terms of balance because you're balancing versus the other cards, and then there's no baseline that you're measuring yourself against. Whereas in PvE game like Diablo, you have the baseline of the enemies that you're measuring yourself against.
It depends on if the card game has a rotating format or not.
Right, sure. You are comparing yourself versus the old decks, but you're still only competing against other people using cards. You have the same tool set available to you as does your opponent. Or that's not Like,
sorta. I mean, yeah, I get like what you mean, but they're not like one-to-one comparisons, so it's not like.
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in card game balancing, balancing any game.
So, like, I think to elaborate Pacific's point, a 1-mana 3/3 on its own with no other context is not necessarily good. But like if no other cards are normal, like the standard of cards is a 1-mana.
Do I leave the dungeon, Sato?
Then it becomes real. Then obviously that card's powerful. Is that what you're trying to say, Persnickety? Is that like there's no like inherent power level to a card? It's the power level is based on its relativity to other cards.
No, it's more saying, what you're saying is correct. That wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making is that if a card that said 3/3 was printed, we already have a comparison in Diablo 4, which is that the mobs are 1/3s, right? And it feels like all we've been given are 2/1s. And 2/1s, you might say, oh, that looks good, but it turns out 2/1s are shit because the enemies are all playing 1/3s.
Right.
You guys finish the top
value
side?
trade.
Yeah, it's done.
I think you meant 3/3s, but yeah.
Anytime you take
Even a 1/3,
just leave the.
Value trade too, right?
Sure, yeah.
Would
I
slaughter.
wasn't thinking you said 1/2s, but yeah, you're right. 2/1s.
2/1s versus 1/3s, you just get value traded. You're just fucking mad.
After this one, we should go vendor. So before Egg invite us, we go vendor. Just leave the party.
Do that next time, Randall. Do this next one.
Yeah.
I did one more than you though, Egg. So that's why I was doing this one.
So I want to circle back to a discussion that was happening, I think it was either before we started stream or as the stream was starting, which was the talk about twisting blades and specifically the nerfs that happened to Rogue. And Eggman's position was that nerfs bad, never a nerfs always bad. And specifically, it is especially egregious when the nerf is to the feel of a build. Things like attack speed or cooldown. And I think Egg's big dumb and incorrect, but
I also do not share that sentiment.
I think there are often times where nerfs are appropriate and needed, but the idea of a nerf is that you take whatever is the top thing and you push it down to where you make it to where other things are now viable. And this again gets back to the idea of having a baseline to measure yourself against in a PvE game, which is that there is a reason why those other builds were not being played. And it's not just because the top build was better, although that is a primary reason. It's also that the builds that were less good weren't able to perform the content that that top build could. So in a card game, for example, when you nerf something and you allow other builds to come up, now everyone's playing in an environment where the power level is reduced. Whereas in a PvE game or ARPG, when you nerf something, the environment is still the same. And so you always have to have nerfs paired with buffs. It's fine if you want to take down some overperforming thing, but you have to put other stuff up to make it to where people don't feel as though they're now just punched into the dirt, unable to do what they were before. And unfortunately, that means that if you come out with something that is too powerful, you have to have that as your baseline now, because players will expect that they have gotten to a point, and then taking players away from that point, especially like midday, is I think fair to Egg's point, unacceptable. I think Egg would say that that's bad, unacceptable. You can't do that. And while Egg, big dumb, I do agree with him on that you can't take someone that was clearing a certain tier of thing and then say all of the builds that are available to you now can no longer do that thing.
I'm okay. So to elaborate on my point, I'm okay I am more okay with damage nerfs than I am with quality of life nerfs. When you attack the quality of life of the function or the quality of life of a skill is when I start to get really triggered, which is exactly what they did to all of the good builds, which is a problem. And it's not even a problem immediately. I think that it just foreshadows bad design decisions to be continually made in the future. It's not a good first patch. But I also think that it's usually not acceptable to nerf damage. Also, because like we're already not doing a lot of damage, so like I mean,
this number's kind of small though. Where's my trillion?
It's not even the number. It's literally just like relative to the content.
Yeah. Fucking Bob's got fucking.
But also, where's my trillions?
Good point. Yeah. Where's my fucking int caps, bro?
I don't want the memingness of me liking big numbers to get in the way of what I'm actually trying to say though.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I do like big numbers, but like that's not the point. The point is it's a principle. Like
was Sato's point, which is that having a build like the Twisting Blades one, where it removes the cooldown of it and has the super high APM build, like having that and trying to balance it against other builds is incredibly difficult, which I think was his point earlier. And like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, but
and the answer is that you balance it by results. Where you look at the tier that build can do, and then the tier that other builds can do, and then you take the other builds and you buff them to where they can then do that tier. And you might say, well, it's really hard to make other builds do the same tier because they don't have as many button presses. It's just numbers. I think that it's a completely balanceable situation, and didn't warrant a nerf to the playstyle.
Okay, I just good question mark? Good helm? Nope. Nope, shit helm.
And someone pick me up real quick so I can pick up a helmet.
Leading party, right?
TP Town now, and then remember to use your potions.
Do I leave game first in TP Town?
Just leave party, then TP Town.
Yeah. And you can just take your own portal back.
And once we are ready, you can just get back.
Oh, I just saw someone in SC whose name was Yumi.
Yummy.
You like Yumi, Persnickety?
Cat chest.
Cat chest. Yumi from League of Legends.